ever find stolen evidence planted in your bag, do exactly what this janitor did. He realized the CEO was watching him, waiting for the police to make the arrest. So, using a sleight of hand technique, he transferred the stolen diamond watch from his bag to the CEO's coat without breaking eye contact. The cops are sealing the exits. The CEO is smiling. But who is actually going to jail in the next 10 seconds? If this story resonates with you, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow, Lucas and I will be giving you another story just as crazy as this one. You don't want to miss it. Now, let us begin. The sound of the squeegee against the floor-to-ceiling glass was rhythmic, almost hypnotic. Squeak, swipe. Squeak, swipe. Lucas Bennett wiped a bead of sweat from his forehead with the back of his sleeve, careful not to touch the pristine window he'd just polished. From the 45th floor of the Valerius Group tower, the city below looked like a circuit board of gold and amber lights. It was a view for kings, for titans of industry, not for men who wore gray jumpsuits with the name Lucas stitched over the pocket. He checked his cheap digital wristwatch, 7:45 a.m. The executives would be swarming in 15 minutes. "Come on, Lucas," he whispered to himself, his voice raspy from lack of sleep. "One more hour, then you can pick up Sophie." Sophie, his 7-year-old daughter, was the only reason he endured the invisibility of this job. She needed braces, and the specialist said her jaw alignment was causing her headaches. That surgery cost more than Lucas made in 6 months, but looking at the marble floors he kept spotless, he swallowed his pride. Pride didn't pay medical bills. Suddenly, the elevator doors chimed, a sharp, urgent sound. The air in the hallway seemed to drop 10 degrees. A phalanx of assistants rushed out, followed by a woman who commanded the space without saying a word. Saskia Valerius. She wore a tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than Lucas's car, and her dark hair was pulled back in a severe, flawless knot. She was beautiful, undeniably, but it was a terrifying kind of beauty. Trailing behind her like a nervous puppy was Marcus Thorne, the branch CEO. Marcus was a man who smiled too much with his mouth and never with his eyes. "The audit needs to be flawless, Marcus," Saskia said, her voice low but carrying effortlessly down the corridor. "My father built this branch on integrity. I won't let sloppy bookkeeping ruin his legacy." "Of course, Miss Valerius," Marcus stammered, sweating despite the climate control. "Everything is—" Marcus stopped. He had nearly tripped over Lucas's yellow caution sign. The CEO's face turned red. The fear he felt towards Saskia instantly converted into rage towards the easiest target available. He kicked the sign over. It clattered loudly on the marble, echoing like a gunshot. "You!" Marcus snarled, pointing a manicured finger at Lucas. "Can't you see we're walking here? Are you trying to kill someone with this clutter?" Lucas didn't flinch. He was used to this. He bent down, picking up the sign with quiet dignity. "I apologize, Mr. Thorne. I was just finishing the glass." "Finish it faster," Marcus hissed, glancing nervously at Saskia if she approved of his dominance. "And get that cart out of the main hall. You look like trash." Saskia stopped. She turned slowly, her eyes drifting from Marcus to Lucas. For a second, her eyes, a striking, intelligent hazel, locked onto Lucas. She didn't look at him with disgust, but with a strange, calculating curiosity. She noticed the way he held his head high despite the insult. "Marcus," she said, her tone cool, "we are late." She tapped her wrist. On it sat the Valerius Legacy watch, platinum encrusted with rare sapphires, a one-of-a-kind piece worth millions. It glittered under the halogen lights, a symbol of power that Lucas could only dream of. As they swept past him into the boardroom, Lucas felt a knot of unease in his stomach. He had seen the desperation in Marcus's eyes. A man that scared was dangerous. Have you ever had a boss who treated you poorly just to impress someone else? Tell me your story in the comments. Lucas pushed his cart towards the service elevator, thinking the encounter was over. He didn't know that in less than an hour, that watch would change his life forever. 40 minutes later, the serene atmosphere of the Valerius Group shattered. "Code red. Seal all exits. No one leaves the floor." The mechanical voice over the PA system was deafening. Lucas froze in the executive break room, his mop hovering inches above the floor. Through the glass walls, he saw pandemonium. Security guards were sprinting down the corridor. Saskia Valeria stood in the doorway of the boardroom, looking pale, her wrist bare. The watch was gone. Lucas's heart hammered against his ribs. He instinctively reached into his cleaning cart to grab his water bottle, needing to calm his nerves. His hand brushed against his canvas lunch bag, but something felt wrong. It was too heavy. He frowned, unzipping the small pocket where he kept his spare change. His breath hitched. The air left his lungs. There, nestled in a dirty rag he used to wipe his shoes, was the platinum sapphire watch. The world tilted. Lucas stared at the glittering diamonds, his mind racing. How? Then the memory flashed. Marcus bumping into his cart earlier, the smirk, the "get this trash out of here." It wasn't an accident. The audit was going badly. Marcus needed a distraction, a scapegoat to take the fall so the audit would be canceled or overshadowed. And who better than the trash janitor? "Security, check their pockets first!" Marcus's voice boomed from the hallway. Lucas looked up. Marcus was standing just outside the break room, screaming at the head of security. He had taken off his suit jacket in the heat of the moment and tossed it carelessly over the back of a waiting room chair just 5 feet away from Lucas's cart. Time seemed to slow. If the guards found this watch on Lucas, it wasn't just fired, it was prison. Sophie would go to foster care. His life would be over. Do something. Now. Adrenaline, cold and sharp, flooded his veins. Lucas grabbed his spray bottle and a cloth. He moved toward the waiting room chair, head down, acting the part of the invisible worker. "I said turn out their pockets," Marcus yelled, his back to Lucas. With a trembling hand, Lucas reached into his pocket, palmed the watch, and in one fluid motion wiped down the armrest of the chair while sliding the watch into the deep inner pocket of Marcus's discarded coat. "You there! Step away!" a guard barked. Lucas jumped back, raising his hands. "Just cleaning, sir." The security team descended on him. They patted him down roughly, emptying his pockets, checking his cart. They dumped his lunch bag on the floor. Nothing. Marcus turned around, a triumphant sneer already forming on his face. "Well, did you find it on the rat?" "He's clean, Mr. Thorne," the guard said, baffled. Saskia stepped forward, her eyes narrowing. "Check everyone, Commander. No exceptions." "Don't be ridiculous, Saskia," Marcus scoffed, grabbing his jacket from the chair. "It's obviously one of the—" As he swung the coat on, the weight of the platinum watch swung in the pocket, hitting the side of the chair with a heavy clunk. Silence fell over the room. The head of security stepped forward. "Sir, empty your pocket." "What?" Marcus laughed nervously. "Don't touch me." The guard didn't ask twice. He reached into Marcus's coat and pulled out the shimmering sapphire watch. The color drained from Marcus's face. He looked at the watch, then at Lucas. His eyes bulged in pure, unadulterated horror. "No, no, he put it there, the janitor. I planted it on him. He must have moved it." The confession hung in the air, louder than a scream. "Arrest him," Saskia whispered, her voice like ice. As the police rushed in to cuff the screaming CEO, Saskia didn't look at Marcus. She looked past him, locking eyes with Lucas. He stood by his cart, breathing hard, his face a mask of shock and survival. The flashing blue lights of the police cruisers reflected off the glass tower, fading into the mid-morning traffic. Inside the Valerius group, the air was thick with the static of shock. Marcus Thorne, a man who had walked these halls like a god an hour ago, was gone. Dragged out in handcuffs, raving like a lunatic about conspiracies and janitors. Lucas stood near the service elevator, his hands gripping the handle of his cart so tightly his knuckles were white. He forced himself to breathe evenly. In, out. Just do the job. He had survived the trap, but the danger wasn't over. He had made an enemy of a powerful man, and he had touched the coat of a CEO. The office was buzzing. Junior executives huddled in corners, whispering about embezzlement, scandals, and who would take Marcus's corner office. Only one person wasn't talking. Saskia Valerius stood alone in the center of the room, staring at the empty chair where Marcus's coat had been. She looked shaken, but her posture was rigid steel. She wasn't grieving the loss of a colleague, she was analyzing a puzzle that didn't quite fit. "I planted it on him!" Marcus had screamed. Saskia turned slowly, scanning the room. Her eyes bypassed the gaping executives and the weeping assistants. They landed, once again, on Lucas. He was the only one moving. He was quietly spraying the glass table where the police had dusted for prints, restoring order to the chaos. Saskia walked toward him. The click of her heels on the marble silenced the nearby whispers. "You," she said. It wasn't a bark like Marcus's, but a precise inquiry. Lucas stopped wiping. He turned, keeping his eyes lowered respectfully. "Ms. Valerius?" "What is your name?" "Lucas, ma'am. Lucas Bennett." Saskia studied him. Up close, she noticed things the distance had hidden. The gray in his temples, the clean but frayed collar of his shirt, and eyes that held a depth of exhaustion she recognized, the look of someone carrying the world on one shoulder. "Marcus said something strange before they took him," Saskia said, her voice low. "He said he planted the watch on you." Lucas's pulse spiked, but his face remained a mask of calm. "Mr. Thorne was very upset, ma'am. People say things when they are scared." "Do they?" Saskia stepped closer, invading his personal space just enough to test him. "Most men would be celebrating seeing their tormentor arrested. You just went back to work. Why?" Lucas looked at her then, really looked at her. He saw the loneliness behind her power. "Because the windows won't clean themselves, Miss Valerius, and chaos doesn't pay my rent." Saskia blinked. In a world of sycophants and liars, his blunt honesty was like a splash of cold water. She looked at the empty CEO office, then back at the janitor who had more composure than her entire board of directors. "I need my office cleared. Marcus left a mess of confidential files. I don't trust anyone on his payroll to touch them. You," she pointed at Lucas, "report to the penthouse in 20 minutes. Bring your shredder." "Me, ma'am?" "Yes, Lucas. You seem to be the only man in this building who knows how to keep his mouth shut." As Saskia walked away, Lucas let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. He had survived the fire, only to be invited into the dragon's den. The penthouse office was a fortress of solitude. At 9 p.m., the rest of the building was dark, but up here, the lights hummed with a clinical brightness. Outside, a winter storm had begun to batter the city, the wind howling against the reinforced glass like a trapped animal. Lucas fed another stack of documents into the industrial shredder. Whir, crunch, silence. He had been at it for 3 hours. His shoulders burned, but he kept his rhythm steady. Across the room, Saskia sat on the floor, not behind her desk, but on the plush carpet, surrounded by boxes of financial records Marcus had tried to hide. She looked different up here. She had kicked off her heels. Her blazer was draped over a chair, revealing silk sleeves rolled up to her elbows. The iron heiress looked small amidst the wreckage of her company's reputation. "He was stealing from the pension fund," Saskia murmured, almost to herself. She held a ledger, her hand trembling slightly. "Families who worked for us for 30 years. He was draining their accounts to pay for his yacht." Lucas paused the shredder. He knew he wasn't supposed to speak, but the pain in her voice was raw. "He's a thief, Miss Valerius. Thieves don't care who they hurt. They only care about what they can take." Saskia looked up. Her eyes were red-rimmed. "I hired him. I promoted him. What does that make me?" "It makes you human," Lucas said, softly. "You can't see into a man's heart by looking at his resume." The air between them shifted. The strict barrier of employer and employee thinned. "I'm starving," she said suddenly, realizing the time. "I haven't eaten since breakfast. There's a kitchen in the back suite. Can you She gestured vaguely, looking helpless for the first time. "I'll see what I can find," Lucas said. He returned 10 minutes later, not with a gourmet meal, but with 2 grilled cheese sandwiches made from the break room supplies. He placed the plate on the floor next to her. "It's not what you're used to," Lucas apologized, wiping his hands on his jumpsuit, "but it's hot." Saskia stared at the sandwich. Then she took a bite. She closed her eyes, letting out a long sigh. "It's the best thing I've tasted in years." She patted the carpet beside her, a silent invitation. Lucas hesitated. I'm dusty, ma'am." "Sit, Lucas," she commanded, but her voice was soft. "Please, I can't look at these numbers anymore without screaming. Just sit." He sat. He was close enough to smell her perfume, jasmine and rain, mixed with the scent of old paper. For the first time, they weren't the billionaire and the janitor. They were just 2 tired people seeking shelter from the storm outside. Lucas stepped out of his role to comfort her. "Have you ever found a friend in an unexpected place? Let me know in the comments." The storm outside intensified, rattling the heavy glass panes. A sudden crack of thunder made the lights flicker, plunging the penthouse into semi-darkness for a heartbeat before the backup generators hummed to life. In the dim light, Lucas's phone buzzed on the floor between them. The screen lit up, illuminating the wallpaper, a photo of a little girl with a gap-toothed smile, wearing a plastic tiara. Saskia glanced at it. Her expression, usually so guarded, softened instantly. "She has your eyes," Saskia said quietly. Lucas reached for the phone, a protective instinct kicking in. "That's Sophie. She's 7. "She looks happy," Saskia observed, tracing the rim of her coffee cup. "You must be a good father." Lucas let out a dry, self-deprecating chuckle. "I try, ma'am. But happiness is expensive these days. She needs jaw surgery. The specialists say it's urgent, but the insurance—" He trailed off, realizing he was overstepping. "Sorry, you don't need to hear my sob story." "No," interrupted Saskia, her voice firm but gentle. "It's real. Everything else in this building is fake. The numbers, the projections, the smiles, it's all smoke. That," she pointed to the phone, "that is real." She pulled her knees to her chest, looking smaller than Lucas had ever seen her. "The watch," she whispered, "the one Marcus stole. It wasn't just an asset. It was the last thing my father gave me before he died. He told me, 'Saskia, time is the only thing you can't buy. Spend it with people who matter.'" She looked at Lucas, her hazel eyes glistening. "I've spent the last 5 years surrounding myself with people like Marcus, people who would sell me for a quarterly bonus. I think my father would be ashamed of me." Lucas felt a pang of guilt sharp enough to cut. Here she was, mourning the betrayal of her trust, and he was sitting beside her, holding the secret that he had manipulated the evidence. Yes, Marcus was guilty, but Lucas had played God to save himself. He looked at her, at the vulnerability she was entrusting him with. He wanted to tell her. He needed to tell her. "Miss Valerius," Lucas started, his voice thick. "There's about the watch. When I found it—" "Don't," she said softly, misunderstanding his hesitation. She reached out, her cool hand covering his rough, calloused one. "You don't have to reassure me, Lucas. You're the only reason I have it back. You're the only reason I'm sane right now." Her touch burned his skin. She was thanking him for his loyalty, unaware that his survival had depended on a lie. The words died in his throat. He couldn't ruin this, not now. "I'm just glad you're okay, Saskia," he said, using her name for the first time. She didn't correct him. She just squeezed his hand, and for a moment the storm outside ceased to exist. Over the next 3 days, the dynamic on the 45th floor shifted imperceptibly but profoundly. Officially, Lucas was still the janitor. He emptied the bins and polished the brass. But unofficially, he had become the only person Saskia Valerius allowed past the heavy oak doors of her temporary office. The interim executives were terrified of her. They brought her spreadsheets filled with jargon trying to cover up the mess Marcus had left. Saskia would listen, rub her temples, and wait for them to leave. Then she would look at Lucas, who was quietly watering the plants in the corner. "They're lying about the warehouse morale, aren't they?" she asked on Wednesday, staring at a report claiming efficiency was up. Lucas paused. "They aren't lying, ma'am. They just don't know. They look at numbers. I talk to the guys on the loading dock when I take the trash down. The heating has been broken in Zone 4 for a month. The guys are freezing. They're working slow because their hands are numb." Saskia stared at him. She picked up her phone and dialed the facilities VP. "Fix the heating in Zone 4 today and send a coffee truck to the dock, on my personal tab." She hung up and looked at Lucas with a small, genuine smile. "You're better at this than my board of directors." "I just listen, Saskia," he said. The use of her first name had become natural in these quiet moments. On Thursday evening, the bond deepened. As Lucas was packing up his cart to leave, Saskia called him over. She reached into her drawer and pulled out a small wrapped package. I remembered you said Sophie needed braces," Saskia said, looking uncharacteristically shy. "This isn't for that. I know you have pride. But I saw this in a bookstore window and thought of her." Lucas took the package. He unwrapped it carefully. It was a beautiful, leather-bound pop-up book about the solar system. "She wants to be an astronaut," Lucas whispered, his throat tight. He hadn't told Saskia that. She had guessed, or she had noticed the space stickers on his water bottle. She had paid attention. "Thank you," he said, looking up. The distance between them vanished. Saskia walked around the desk. She stood close enough that he could count the flecks of gold in her eyes. The air in the room grew heavy, charged with a magnetic pull that terrified and thrilled them both. "I don't know what I'm going to do when I have to go back to headquarters," she confessed, her voice barely a whisper. "I don't trust anyone here, Lucas. Only you. You're the only thing that feels true." She leaned in slightly. It was a moment of pure, suspended possibility. Lucas felt a surge of hope he hadn't felt in years. Maybe, just maybe, a guy like him could have a happy ending. But in the back of his mind, the secret of the watch ticked like a time bomb. Friday morning arrived with a biting frost. The warmth of the previous night had evaporated, replaced by a tension that Lucas felt the moment he stepped off the service elevator. Two men in expensive pinstripe suits were standing outside Saskia's office. Lawyers. Marcus Thorne's legal defense team. Lucas's stomach dropped. He tried to turn his cart around, but the office door opened. Saskia stood there. Her face was pale, her expression unreadable, a mask of porcelain and ice. "Mr. Bennett," she said. The warmth was gone. The use of his surname fell like a gavel. "Come inside." Lucas left the cart and walked into the office. On Saskia's desk, a laptop was open, playing a grainy black-and-white video loop. "Marcus's lawyers found a corrupted file from a backup server," Saskia said, her voice trembling with suppressed rage. "They had it enhanced." She turned the screen toward him. The video showed the break room. It showed Lucas crouching by his cart. It showed him pulling something out of his bag, a blur, and then swiftly, guiltily, sliding his hand into Marcus's coat pocket. It didn't show Marcus planting it earlier. It only showed Lucas moving it. "Tell me," Saskia whispered, her eyes pleading him to deny it. "Tell me you didn't steal it." "I didn't steal it," Lucas stepped forward, desperate. "Marcus put it in my bag. I found it moments before the lockdown. If I hadn't moved it, I would be in jail right now." "So you planted evidence?" one of the lawyers sneered. "Tampering with a crime scene?" "I was saving my life," Lucas shouted, looking at Saskia. "You know how he treated me. You know what he is. If they found that watch on me, who would believe the janitor over the CEO?" Saskia stared at him. The betrayal in her eyes was devastating. It wasn't about the watch anymore. "You sat here," she said, her voice breaking. "You sat on this floor, held my hand, and let me tell you about my father. You let me believe you were this pillar of integrity, and the whole time you were lying to my face." "I wasn't lying about us, Saskia." "Don't call me that," she snapped, recoiling as if he had slapped her. "I trusted you.
I thought you were the one honest thing in this city, but you're just like the rest of them, manipulating the truth to save yourself." Lucas lied to save his daughter, but it cost him Saskia's trust. Was he wrong to hide the truth from her? Tell me below. She looked away, unable to bear the sight of him. "Surrender your badge, Mr. Bennett. You're suspended pending a full police investigation. If they find proof you stole it originally, God help you." Lucas placed his badge on the mahogany desk. It clicked softly, the sound of a life breaking. He walked out of the office, past the sneering lawyers, past the whispering staff. He took the service elevator down to the street, the cold winter air hitting him like a physical blow. He had survived the trap, but he had lost the woman who had finally made him feel seen.
The apartment was small, dimly lit, and smelled of lavender laundry detergent, the only scent that reminded Lucas of peace. He sat at the kitchen table, his head in his hands. Across the room, Sophie was asleep, clutching the space pop-up book Saskia had given her. Lucas had already packed 2 boxes. He couldn't stay in the city. Without a reference from Valerius Group, no one would hire him. He was back to zero. Worse than zero. He was a man marked as a thief. His phone sat on the table. He wanted to text Saskia. He wanted to type out the whole truth about the fear, about Marcus, about how much her belief in him had meant. But his thumb hovered over the screen. "What's the point?" a voice whispered. "She's a Valerius. You're a janitor. The fairy tale is over." But then he looked at Sophie. If he ran away now, what was he teaching her? That the truth doesn't matter? That poor men should just disappear when rich men lie? Lucas put the phone down. He grabbed a pen and a piece of paper. He wouldn't beg for his job, but he would fight for his name. Meanwhile, in the penthouse, the silence was deafening. Saskia sat in the dark, the glow of the laptop illuminating her tired face. Marcus's lawyers had left hours ago, smug and victorious, convinced they had exonerated their client. But Saskia couldn't sleep. The image of Lucas's face when she accused him, the desperation, the hurt, haunted her. She played the video again and again. Frame 402, Lucas reaches into the bag. Frame 403, he pulls out the watch. Saskia hit pause. She zoomed in on Lucas's face. A thief finding his loot looks satisfied. A thief looks cunning. Lucas looked terrified. His eyes were wide, his mouth open in a silent gasp of horror. He looked like a man holding a grenade. "He didn't steal it," Saskia whispered to the empty room. "He found it." She frantically opened the other security files, the ones the lawyers hadn't shown her. She pulled up the hallway feed from earlier that morning, 7:55 a.m. She saw Marcus. He was red-faced, angry. He kicked the caution sign. Then, as he passed Lucas's cart, he stumbled. His hand dipped quickly toward the open cleaning bag. It was a blur, barely a second, but it was there. Saskia slammed the laptop shut, her breath coming in shallow gasps. Marcus had framed him. Lucas had reacted in pure self-defense, and she had humiliated the only man who had ever treated her like a human being. She looked at the clock. 2 a.m. She grabbed her coat. She didn't call her driver. She didn't call security. She grabbed her keys and ran for the elevator. A heavy knock echoed through the small apartment. Lucas froze. He stared at the door, his heart pounding. The police? Had they come to arrest him in the middle of the night? He walked to the door, took a deep breath, and opened it. It wasn't the police. Saskia stood in the hallway. She was breathless, her hair wind-blown, her expensive coat wet with snow. She looked completely out of place in the peeling, dim corridor, and yet she looked more real than she ever had in the glass tower. "Saskia?" Lucas whispered. "I saw the hallway feed," she blurted out, skipping the pleasantries. She stepped inside, uninvited, her energy filling the small room. "I saw Marcus kick the sign. I saw him slip the watch into your bag. I saw everything." She stopped, looking at Lucas's packed boxes.
The sight seemed to physically pain her. "You were leaving," Saskia said, her voice trembling. "I didn't have a choice," Lucas said quietly. "I couldn't stay where I wasn't believed." Saskia closed the distance between them. She reached out, taking his hands, rough, calloused hands that had worked so hard to survive. "I am so sorry, Lucas," Saskia said, tears spilling over. "I was so afraid of being betrayed again that I stopped seeing the truth. You didn't just save yourself today, you saved my company. If Marcus had stayed, he would have destroyed everything my father built." She reached into her pocket, not for a badge, but for a folded document. "Marcus is in custody. The board is convening in the morning. I'm firing the entire executive security team for incompetence." She took a breath. "I need a new head of facility operations, someone who knows every inch of that building, someone who sees what others miss, someone with integrity." Lucas looked at her. "I'm just a janitor, Saskia." "No," she shook her head, her gaze fierce and tender. "You're the man who taught me what honor looks like. Please, come back, not for the job, but because I don't want to be in that tower without you." The silence stretched, heavy with promise. Lucas looked at the woman who had driven across the city in a snowstorm for him. He saw the loneliness she was finally ready to let go of. He smiled, the weight of the last 24 hours lifting. "I'll take the job on one condition. Anything. You let me buy you dinner, somewhere with plastic chairs and really good burgers." Saskia laughed, a sound of pure relief. "Deal." From the bedroom doorway, a sleepy voice murmured, "Daddy, is that the lady who gave me the space book?" Sophie rubbed her eyes, holding the pop-up book. Saskia crouched down, eye level with the little girl. "Hi, Sophie," Saskia said softly. "Yes, I'm Saskia." "Are you going to stay?" Sophie asked, innocently. Lucas looked at Saskia. The Ice Queen was gone. In her place was a woman who had finally found home. "I hope so," Saskia whispered, looking up at Lucas. He pulled her up and kissed her, a soft, lingering promise of a new beginning. He had started the day as an invisible man fearing a trap, but he ended it seen, valued, and loved. Lucas went from invisible to indispensable. Thank you for watching another story of Lucas Bennett to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as wild and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So like the video and subscribe for more, because Lucas and I will be waiting for you tomorrow.